Hey gang, welcome back to another video. So this week I'm dipping back into the Star Wars Visual Dictionary for a prop that gets a bit more screen time than some of the others I've made. Although this one spends most of its screen time obscured by someone's hand. So you know I had to make it. Alright, let's get into it. This build was inspired by a photo from the Star Wars Visual Dictionary, since we never really see all of this comlink in The Last Jedi. Between a limited amount of time on screen and the fact that both characters are almost completely obscuring this prop, the photo was my best resource, and so I got to modeling. This prop is quite small, roughly 3.5 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide, which meant that all of the parts would be tough to mask off if I made it a solid model. So with that in mind, I decided to make all of the details slot into one another. This not only saves me the trouble of masking, but also gives the prop more of a real-world feel, since all of the seam lines between surfaces are much more pronounced. When I was happy with my model, I sent it to my resin printer, and a few hours later I had all of my pieces. The prop looks to me to have two different metal finishes, so having the print-in parts will make this whole process a lot easier. Now I just need to get some primer on them. After a bit of dry time, I grabbed the main body of the comlink and stuck it to a popsicle stick lined with double-stick carpet tape, and could get to applying silver spray paint. This is the same Duplicolor paint I used for the Boba Fett Sonic Beam prop, and it's a great generic metal color that should work perfectly for this project. I applied a few light coats and helped to speed up the drying process with my hairdryer before setting it aside so that I could work on the smaller detail pieces. These parts also got stuck to popsicle stick handles and were painted with a gloss black spray paint. Now if I had to do this again, I would have applied a matte black and followed it up with a high gloss clear, since this paint took considerably longer to dry than anticipated, especially considering it was a warm day. Unfortunately, when you're working to a deadline, you don't always have time to wait, so I kept it moving once the paint seemed dry to the touch. For the small panel detail, I went with an off-white spray paint that looked similar to what we see in the Visual Dictionary photo, and then it also was set out in the sunshine to dry for a while. The second finish on this prop looks to be a more chrome-like metal finish, so I grabbed some all-clad chrome in my airbrush, along with the parts I painted gloss black, and got to applying the paint. For this paint, I'm running my compressor at about 15 psi, which gives the best finish without wasting a ton of paint in the process. And after a few passes with the all-clad, all of the chrome-like parts were set aside to dry. At this point, the off-white panel detail was dry and could be glued into position. Once it was set, I could get to another detail that's kind of a new material for me on prop builds like this. The photo of this prop clearly shows a leather-like detail along the lower half of the device. So I grabbed an offcut from a local fabric store, cut it down to size, and then used some masking tape to determine where the grip should go. When it looked close to equal on the front and back of the comlink, I applied some Super 77 spray adhesive to the back of the leather, and then used my hairdryer to get it to a tacky state. Then it was just a matter of lining it up with my masking tape lines and pressing it into position. Now because I'll be adding this piece to my collection of other small props and vintage toy packaging, the spray adhesive will be just fine. But if you were going to be handling the prop, I'd recommend using a contact adhesive like barge cement. It's been about an hour since I put the chromed parts out in the sun to dry, and they seem to be set, so I got to installing the sidebars. As I set them into place, I noticed two things. One, the part had slightly curled as a result of baking in the sun for a bit too long. And two, as I pressed it into position, I realized it wasn't fully dry, because I could see my glove prints in the finish. That's not ideal, but it's also not going to stop me from finishing this prop. Thankfully, I have a plan that should help to minimize any flaws in the surface finish, but for now, This will get set aside, and hopefully it don't cause any more problems that I'll need to fix later. After another hour and realizing that I had printed 2 of the same sidebar, I kicked off the correct part to print and figured it was safe to add the top microphone detail to the top of the comlink. Off camera, I inserted the black bar into the chromed piece, and now everything can get glued together with a bit more CA glue. As I'm looking at the comlink, I realize I'm not on my A game today, because I forgot to paint the black accents before gluing the parts together. So instead, everything got masked off and I could paint the accent with a matte black spray paint. At this point, everything seemed to be going well until I removed the masking and noticed that the tape had disturbed the chrome finish. To my surprise, the gloss black base paint still wasn't dry, and so all the handling I did of the prop during the masking process created texture in the metallic finish that will now need to be handled just like the prints I left on the side bars. So I left everything to dry a bit longer, got the correct right side bar piece off the printer and got it painted and installed, and now I can get to correcting the issues in my finish. And for that, I'll need a Scotch-Brite pad. My plan here is to use the pad to put small scratches into the chrome finish to make it look more like brushed aluminum. So I lightly pass the pad along the metallic surfaces, making sure to only travel in one direction, and when it looked like the imperfections were gone, I could take a second to admire my work, and then it was off to weathering. For this prop, I had intended to do some weathering using alcohol inks, since that's what it looked like in the photo. But none of my local art stores had any on hand, and I was fresh out. So I went with a mix of burnt umber and black acrylic paints and applied them with a soft bristled brush. Because this prop is so small, there's a fine line when it comes to weathering. You want some in the areas where dirt would naturally accumulate, and possibly where it would be held. But unless you're going for something that's been left out to rust, you really want to show some restraint. And while it looks like I'm going heavy with my application, I know that these paints will lighten slightly as they dry, so I can try to anticipate what that would look like. In the end, if I find that if I've taken it a bit too far, I can use a wet Q-tip to blend or even remove some of the paint until it looks more how I'd intended. The last thing to do is to add in the red dot on the front panel. In the movie version, I assume this was an LED, although we never see it light up, so I'm just going to go with a bit of red acrylic paint. A quick touch-up for where I overshot the edge, and this comlink was done.
I can't really put my finger on why these small prop builds are so enjoyable to me, aside from seeing them hanging on pegboards like the toys of my childhood. But I think these small, low-stakes prop builds are a great way to stay present, especially when you consider how many things are designed to divide our attention. Well, that's going to do it for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, go make something.